Thundering through the remote wilderness, one of the toughest trains on the planet races the clock.
I'm a bit nervous right now.
This heavy-hauling mega train must transport 1,300 tons of timber a day through treacherous valleys and bustling cities.
If something falls off the train, you can kill someone.
Can this monster freight train deliver a crucial $50,000 payload on time? Breaking this extraordinary machine down into its components, we'll uncover its technological secrets. From high-powered traction motors to a reinforced metal protective cab, we'll reveal how this colossal timber-lugging locomotive evolved to become a mega machine. The sprawling forests of central Norway are home to one of the country's most important industries: paper manufacturing. Here in the town of Hønefoss, workers gather more than 11 million cubic feet of timber every year to feed some of Scandinavia's largest paper mills. Today, a special consignment of 1,300 tons of timber needs hauling to one of Europe's largest paper-producing factories in the far south of the country. This factory supplies the highest quality magazine paper to publishers all over the world, including some of the largest in the United States. To keep the factory running, they need a continuous supply of timber to arrive on a tight schedule. But lying between the forests and the factory is over 100 miles of treacherous terrain. To haul the timber through this wilderness, workers rely on this super tough cargo train. This titanic train can shift 1,300 tons of lumber in a single trip. It's 7 a.m. at the timber yard in Hønefoss. For Jørn Martinsen, the site supervisor, the day is already in full swing. Jørn's loading team have just 4 hours to fill each of the 26 wagons with over 49 tons of timber and set the train on its way to one of this country's largest paper factories, over 100 miles away.
It's very important that we try what we can to keep the schedule. If they don't get enough timber, the factory stops. So we have to deliver in time.
This single delivery is worth almost $50,000, so Jørn can't afford for anything to go wrong. For an ordinary train, moving this 1,300-ton load is impossible. But Jørn's train is no ordinary railroad mega machine. This giant is the Trax 185. Under this monster train, 4 electric motors more powerful than 10 Tesla Model S cars drive 4 sets of steel wheels. A carbon-coated pneumatic arm draws 15,000 volts from an overhead power line, and 26 heavy-duty freight cars, each with 12 telescopic gripper arms, can hold 1,300 tons of timber. These innovations make this train the undisputed heavy-hauling champion of the Norwegian woods. The team used 2 forestry cranes to shift the 640-pound tree trunks into the waiting freight cars. Giant 8-foot steel grips on the sides of the cars hold each trunk in place. Jørn's first job is to make sure every log on the entire 400-yard train sits safely within these steel grips. Just one loose log falling onto a passenger-filled platform along this busy route could be fatal.
The train is going through several towns with platforms and a lot of people. And if something falls off the train, you can kill someone.
It takes until 11 a.m. to secure all 26 cars. Jørn clears the train for departure.
Train is safe.
Delivering this precious cargo rests on the shoulders of driver Sandra Lahtinen.
I'm glad that I'm entrusted this task to drive a train because of the responsibility, and I try my best to be on schedule.
Each fully loaded timber car weighs over 63 tons. And Sandra must shift 26 of them at once. The train needs to apply a massive amount of force to stop the payload getting stuck in the timber yard. The path to timber pulling power starts with a highly conductive arm that draws 15,000 volts from an overhead line. Onboard converters adjust this electricity to power 4 induction motors. Their copper coils produce powerful magnetic fields that spin faster than an aircraft propeller. These tug the motor's inner rotor around with them, generating enough force to tow a 747. So this train can pull 26 loaded cars from a standing start to 60 miles per hour. For Sandra, even with her 7,500 horsepower engine, it's not as straightforward as just pulling away. This much power could rip the train apart.
So I'll have to start very easy to make sure I have the whole of the train with me.
Sandra needs all the engine's 7,500 horsepower thrust to shift a payload this heavy. But if she turns the train's motors to full power immediately, the incredible force is simply too strong for the couplings between the driver's cab and the freight cars, and will snap them in two.
If you break the coupling between the carriages, you won't get very far. We have to be gentle with these expensive vehicles. But you kind of have to learn to feel the force.
The train has over 100 miles of treacherous landscape to cross in less than 5 hours to arrive at the factory on time. Sandra gradually picks up pace, but she can't ease off until she has enough momentum to run at full speed.
Now I'm quite comfortable that we are going to manage this. So that's a good feeling.
The timber train carves through small villages with a total carriage length stretching longer than the Eiffel Tower is tall. It's a good start, but Sandra can't rest easy. Many hazards lie on the epic journey ahead. The mega train must travel over 100 miles from the middle of Norway to the deep south, cross a landscape fraught with dangers that could cause delay. From the timber terminal of Hønefoss, the train must wind its way around fjords and along treacherous river bends. Then it must dodge passenger trains as it navigates the busy capital, Oslo. Finally, the train must scale steep hills before reaching the paper factory in the southern city of Halden. But guiding this massive load out of Hønefoss has its own challenges. The town is built on the banks of the Begna River, and the railway tracks follow its winding bends. Take a corner too fast, and the entire train could derail. More than 4,000 miles of rivers crisscross Norway. These vast winding waterways carve through the hilly countryside and are an iconic feature of Norway's landscape.
Love driving alongside the rivers, and that's absolutely lovely to look at.
But these rivers also pose a deadly threat for Sandra's mega freight train. The track ahead follows the meandering curves of the fast-flowing Begna River. It's a long, snaking route, but if Sandra takes the bends too quickly, the 1,700-ton monster train could run off the tracks.
Sometimes I get haunted in my dreams, like nightmares of derailing.
This is because Sandra's mega freight train faces a problem that traditional locomotives don't have. Since the early days of steam, traditional passenger trains relied on the simple cone shape of their wheels to navigate bends. As the wheels hit the bend, the outer wheel rides up onto a wider section of the cone, and the inner wheel drops down on a narrower section. This way, the outer wheels travel further than the inner wheels, and the train moves in a curve to follow the bend. For traditional trains, cone-shaped wheels are enough to tackle most bends. But Sandra's 1,744-ton mega freight train is too long and heavy to rely on the shape of its wheels alone. It needs an added injection of 21st century engineering to prevent it from derailing around tight curves like this. Beneath this 90-ton juggernaut are two flexible steering assemblies that guide this machine along the tracks. 4 steel springs allow each assembly to twist and tightly follow a bend. 2 smaller steel springs at each wheel absorb shocks from bumpy tracks. A hydraulic piston at each wheel soaks up vibrations from the springs. This smart system ensures the train can maintain its speed around a tight bend without derailing. The train navigates safely through the Hörnefoss bends and powers south. 100 miles away, in Halden, Anders Hoge Johansson, the paper factory's technical manager, is eagerly awaiting the fresh timber load.
We have some of the largest paper consumers in the world as our customers.
The factory supplies a staggering 14% of the world's highest quality uncoated magazine paper and produces upwards of 9,000 tons of it every week.
It's a lot of paper, it's a lot of rolls.
Demand for timber is non-stop, and the factory can't afford anything to delay Sandra's train arriving on time.
This factory is totally dependent on supply of fresh wood. Without wood, there's no production here. It's critical for our business that the trains meet our timetables and are ready to unload at the set given time.
Inside the factory, a giant debarker machine strips the bark from the tree logs and shreds the trunks into wood chips, which are ground into fibrous strands to make the pulp. The team then mixed this pulp with water to create a thick paper base. Finally, the factory's rollers do the rest. They flatten and compress the pulp over and over again to create the finished product.
In many respects, our paper is the best quality paper in the world. We do here at the mill everything we can to make sure that our clients get the right quality paper in the right amount at the right time, every time.
But the factory can only operate when they have a constant supply of wood. Back on the tracks, Sandra faces a new challenge that could delay her journey. A section of the track so steep that speed alone isn't enough to get the train over the hill. She'll have to deploy this train's secret weapon.
It's a super invention.
Norway is a country of fjords, deep valleys and hills carved by glacier during the last ice age. They make the Norwegian landscape very mountainous. But these mountains pose a huge challenge for a freight train carrying a load that weighs more than 7 blue whales.
The landscape itself, challenge for the driver. It's not flat and straightforward.
The train makes it through Hernefoss's winding bends. Now, Sandra faces the next test. The track ahead follows steep inclines, including a hill that rises 100 feet in less than a mile. This incline may not sound like much, but for a train's steel wheels, it's a monumental challenge.
When you have forces working against you uphill, you have to work hard.
For a train, having steel wheels running on smooth steel tracks is both a blessing and a curse. On the flat, it can roll effortlessly and pull 5 times more weight per horsepower than a truck. But on a hill, the steel wheels lose their grip on the smooth steel rails, and the heavy load pulls the train back. This gets even worse when it rains, and once the wheels get into a spin on a hill, it's game over. Norway's unpredictable autumn weather makes the mountainous landscape even more precarious for the 1,700-ton train to climb. And a recent sprinkling of rain is the last thing Sandra needs.
During wet weather is extra difficult.
To stop it getting stuck on an incline, this fully loaded freight train packs an ace up its sleeve. Hanging in front of each wheel is a metal box that can hold 13 gallons of sand. A small heating element inside the box keeps the sand warm and dry, even in the cold Norwegian autumn. A compressor fitted with 2 heavy-duty screws shoots compressed air into the box to blast a jet of dry sand under the wheels. This gives the train traction even on the steepest, wettest climbs. Sandra switches on the sandbox and fires a blast of sand in front of the wheels.
The secret weapon for getting up hills is the sandboxes.
The quartz grains in the sand are harder than steel and dig into any small grooves in the wheel or rail. The sand-blasted wheels grip the track. The train claws its way up the hills.
Sand is definitely a lifesaver. It wouldn't be possible sometimes without the sandboxes.
It's vital that the sandboxes work without fail, so the train can navigate Norway's mountainous landscape. But the sandboxes are located next to the wheel underneath the train, which makes them vulnerable to wear and tear.
Even losing one sandbox could cause trouble.
Deep underground, below the city of Oslo, is the place that keeps mega trains like Sandra's in top condition. At the Lordalen repair yard, engineers like Philip Simonsen fix up to 1,000 trains each year. Today, Philip undertakes an inspection of an identical train to Sandra's Trax 185 timber locomotive. This machine had an unfortunate collision with a wild moose.
There's probably some moose left here.
And Philip suspects that the crash damaged one of the sandboxes. This could pose a serious problem for the train on its next journey.
In Norway, the traction is very important because we have steep hills and a lot of mountains. If you don't have the sand, you might as well not come up the hill.
Philip inspects the underside of the locomotive and identifies the damaged section.
This nozzle is supposed to be aiming to the wheel, straight through between the tracks and the wheels, not underneath the loco like it's doing now. So it needs to be replaced.
He fits the new sanding components in place.
As you can see now, the nozzle is pointing in the right direction. It's pointing towards the wheel, not underneath the loco, as it was before.
With a brand new sanding tube, this monster train is ready to tackle Norway's mountainous landscape once more. Back in the driver's cab, Sandra approaches the halfway point of her journey. The further south she travels, the more people she encounters. First farms, then towns, then cities. With a surge in passenger trains sharing the line, red stop signs could light up at any moment. Sandra needs enough stopping distance, or it could mean catastrophe for this timber-carrying monster. Sandra's 1,700-ton mammoth train powers south through the dense forests toward farmland and rural communities. She's on high alert and can't afford to take her eyes off the tracks. After 10 miles of uninterrupted train line, there are places where road traffic must cross the track. Colliding with a vehicle stuck on a railroad crossing is every driver's worst nightmare.
If you hit a tractor with a train, that might hurt, actually. I haven't hit anyone, luckily. But I've had near misses earlier, and of course that kind of marks you. It's not something you can really imagine before it happens.
As she approaches a crossing, Sandra sounds her horn to warn any rural farm traffic that her mega timber train is passing through.
That crossing doesn't have any barriers, so you have to warn a potential tractor or pedestrian that the train is coming. The main thing, more than anything, is safety, both for us and for the community around.
Though accidents are rare, this train must be built to survive worst-case scenarios. The snowplow is the first line of defense to protect the driver. It can push a wild moose off the tracks without stopping the train. Just above it, 2 buffers with elastic rings can deflect objects as heavy as a small car. A steel cage around the driver is designed to crumple in a predictable way, while keeping a safe survival zone in the cab during a collision with a truck. And a high-strength steel wall protects against sharp objects. Together, these keep the drivers safe from almost anything the journey throws at them. 2 hours along her route, Sandra reaches a metropolitan city neighboring Oslo. She's almost at the halfway point, but can't afford to lose time, as the factory's production line rests on her delivery.
As we cannot keep the guys on the factory waiting.
The terrain changes as high-rise buildings replace farmland. But as the scenery changes, so does the danger. Instead of worrying about tractors, she must now shift her focus to passenger trains.
We're not in the wooden landscape anymore. Here the traffic is more intense. There are several tracks here.
Sandra's train is 3 times heavier than an ordinary passenger train and has a much longer stopping distance. A collision with another locomotive would be fatal. It's a busy midweek in the country's capital, with more than 30 trains an hour leaving the main station, Oslo Central. As Sandra approaches, passenger train traffic surrounds her on all sides. This is a recipe for chaos. To avoid a deadly collision, Sandra has a team of protectors guarding over her. Tale Frostrand is scheduling controller in Oslo's Train Traffic Control Center. From here, Tale and the team keep a careful eye on all the trains coming and going on the lines in and around Oslo.
Everything that happens with the train is monitored by us and controlled by us. A lot of traffic in rush hours during the morning and in the afternoon. Trains coming and going every 2 minutes, and it's quite busy.
Tale and her team need to keep Sandra's freight train safe by carefully scheduling the other trains around it.
It's a little bit like playing chess. You need to think a few steps ahead all the time.
But when a train is running late, dangerous bottlenecks can form. So the Traffic Control Center put special measures in place to prevent passenger trains from slamming into the back of Sandra's 400-yard log-laden freight train. Every time the timber train passes a green light, the tracks sense the wheels and change the light to red. This leaves a trail of no-go zones behind our train, creating a safe distance for any trains following it. If a driver runs the red, a transmitter on the tracks beams a command to the train to automatically apply emergency brakes.
It's in our backbone as a controller. You always think safety first.
With these inbuilt safety measures, the team in the traffic control room can ensure the trains can go as fast as possible without any danger of crashing. Tale counts herself lucky to live in an era of rail safety, because much of today's ultra-safe infrastructure owes its existence to a 20-year-old tragedy. On the 4th of January 2000, 2 passenger trains collided in the town of Asta in Norway. The crash tragically killed 19 people. In the wake of this devastating accident, engineers installed automatic braking systems on every train line across the country.
I know people who were at work the day the Asta accident happened. And it's difficult to remember and to talk about, but it's important that we remember, and it's important that we work every day to make sure that nothing like that will ever happen again.
It's 2 p.m. and the mega train passes through the country's busiest station, Oslo Central, without a hitch.
Now we have passed the busy area. I'm hoping to make up some speed. That gives me a hope that we will reach our destination more or less on time.
As Sandra pulls away from Oslo, she reaches a stretch of track that crosses the Glomma River, the longest waterway in Norway. The view is jaw-dropping, but there's a problem. The bridge over the river comes just after a sharp bend at the bottom of a steep hill.
You have to be careful when going down the slope so you don't derail.
And derailing on a bridge would be fatal. The 1,700-ton freight train steams ahead, over halfway through its 100-mile journey. Sandra must be on her guard. Beyond the rural towns after Oslo, the terrain begins to drop.
Main key is actually to have knowledge of the area you're driving in, so that you know what comes up next. I need to anticipate the landscape before it changes.
If left unchecked, the fully loaded timber train could build up so much momentum, Sandra could lose control when speeding downhill.
The gradients are hard because you'll have to prevent the train from running away from you.
Sandra's first line of defense owes its origins to 150 years of engineering evolution. If a driver doesn't slow down on a descent, a freight train could derail on the next bend. In the early days of railway, freight trains had a brakeman on each carriage who would manually apply a brake. But in 1869, George Westinghouse invented an air-powered system that the driver operated to apply continuous braking power to all train cars. This is what most ordinary freight trains use even today to keep their cars in check on a descent. Sandra keeps one hand on the air brakes as she powers through the smaller hills. But up ahead is a 3-mile-long downhill stretch that hits a precarious bend into a bridge at the bottom. As she approaches this descent, she must turn to another incredible technology. Because when you have a train this heavy and a hill this long, air brakes alone aren't enough. Using the brakes heats up the discs and wears down the brake pads over time. So the driver uses the motors as brakes. She slows their spinning magnetic fields, resisting the rotor's motion, slowing them down. The wheels now decelerate without touching the brakes. The motor uses energy from the wheels to produce electricity. As the train slows down, it feeds this power back to the overhead lines. This clever friction-free system is called regenerative braking. Sandra switches it on, and the train speed gradually drops to a steady level, keeping control of the 1,300-ton load behind. She eases over the bridge safely without even touching the air brakes.
It's amazing to think that with the help of the magnetic field in the motor, it can almost stop a heavy loaded train.
It's not only Sandra who is thankful for regenerative brakes. In the repair yard, Philip undertakes a crucial inspection on another colossal Trax 185 freight train.
We see a huge difference between the locomotives with and without the regenerative brakes, because the ones without wear down the brake pads really fast compared to these ones.
But no matter how careful the drivers are, it's impossible to avoid wear and tear on these monster trains when driving through Norway's rugged terrain.
Norway is a tough place for trains to run. It's not possible to avoid that. You'll have to maintain it and keep the trains running.
Philip guides the train down into the heart of the underground repair yard, onto raised tracks, so he can access the brakes.
You gotta check the entire locomotive, get it underneath, and it's messy, it's greasy, and you get your hands dirty.
Philip detaches the wheel caliper to take a closer look at the brake pads. Friction with the wheel causes the surfaces of the brake pads to wear down over time. This makes them thin and ineffective.
As you can see, this is a new brake pad, and it's like 3 times the size. And the grooves are much deeper, almost gone here. And here they are brand new, so it's a big difference.
Thanks to the work of the electric motor, brake pads this worn out are rare.
Those brake pads are probably 5 years old, so now it's time to change them.
Philip replaces the pads with a new set that should last for the next 5 years. Back in the driver's cab, Sandra races the mega timber train through the Norwegian countryside to deliver her precious timber load on time. On her right is the stunning Idefjord, a strait of water separating Norway and Sweden. And up ahead, the paper factory finally comes into view. Her journey is nearly over, but she has one last challenge to overcome. The factory sits at the top of the steepest incline of the whole route, and the only way to make it up the hill is backwards.
I just hope we get up.
Sandra pulls up 1 mile short of the factory, which sits at the top of a steep hill above. She may be on time, but now faces the toughest test of the entire journey. For the train to run, the front cab must be connected to the power lines. But the tracks closest to the factory don't have any lines above them. This is because the cranes that unload the freight cars can't operate with electrical lines in the way. To keep the train connected to the power lines, Sandra must perform an extraordinary maneuver. She must move the engine to the back of the train and push it uphill, backwards.
This is one of the hardest bits of the journey.
Sandra separates her driver's cab from the front timber car and drives the engine on a parallel track, passing the full length of the payload all the way down to the back of the train. She then reattaches her driver's cab to the very rear freight car. Now she can keep her cab connected to the power lines above the train at all times. But she faces backwards down the slope and is driving blind. As she edges towards the factory, Sandra's locomotive struggles to push all 26 timber cars up the steep hill.
This hill we are climbing is known for being a challenge.
She cranks up the power to the engines to try and keep momentum.
I have to be a little bit careful, not pushing too hard, because I don't want to derail.
The laden freight cars weigh the equivalent of over 230 African elephants, pushing down the hill against the driver's cab. The wheels spin as they struggle for traction on the slippery tracks.
Yeah, I'm a bit nervous right now.
The train slows down to a creep. As dusk falls, Sandra has one last roll of the dice to try and get her up this incline. After using sand throughout the journey, she is down to her last precious reserves. She fires a blast of sand at the wheels. Sandra hopes there's just enough left to give her 1,700-ton train the extra traction it needs to get over the incline.
I'm just watching the speed to see if it's accelerating or if it's decreasing.
She edges the train closer to the top of the hill, hoping it'll make it up to the factory without getting stuck.
I know now that the tail of the train is getting close to the factory.
The driver's cab eases up to the top of the incline without its wheels spinning out of control.
We're not going to get stuck now, so I'm very happy.
Sandra eases the load right into the yard, as far as the overhead cables will take her. For Sandra, her mission is finished. It's now time for some well-earned rest.
We have arrived ahead of schedule, actually, so I'm happy and relieved. It's gonna be good to get home.
The team begin to unload the precious timber and deposit it into the factory for immediate processing. Ready for the eager magazine publishers around the world to hit the newsstands on schedule. For the Trax 185, it's the same again in 12 hours' time. The mission has been a success, thanks to this machine's 4 1,800 horsepower motors. The high-control flexi steering that allows this train to handle even the tightest corners. And the efficient regenerative braking system that maintains momentum without wear and tear on the busiest parts of the track. And the cab's reinforced metallic protective shell that keeps drivers like Sandra safe in the toughest terrain of the Norwegian wilderness. It's these incredible technological features that allow this timber-hauling freight train to be a true mega machine.